Good morning, everybody. I hope you had a wonderful Shabbat and a beautiful Sunday. You know what they say? Winter storms in May keep the murder hornets away. Hope you're enjoying the snow today. I'm not, but I'm trying to get used to it. As you might have known, Israel right now is starting slowly to lift their self-isolation restrictions. They were one of the first countries in the world to really impose quarantine on their population, and it seems to have worked, and now they're feeling a little bit more comfortable that they can let people out, that they can let kids go back to gun, etc. But I remember when all this began, and a cousin of mine, a religious cousin of mine in Jerusalem, was not allowed to go to minyan anymore. He had to daven in his apartment, which was a big change for him. His rabbi told him and the rest of the community, you know what? Now that you have extra time on your hands, you can't go to work, you can't do most of your activities of daily life. Now you have extra time for davening. Before you daven for 30 minutes, now you have an hour to daven. Because we freed up time. We don't have to focus so much on our physiological needs if we think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? We don't have to worry about shelter, we're already there. We don't have to worry about personal safety, we're stuck at home. And we can really move up in his ladder on love and belonging and esteem and even self-actualization through good davening and good learning. And at the time, this actually sounded like a beautiful idea. And maybe for my cousin who has adult children, none of whom live at home anymore, is a grandfather to many, maybe this actually works for him. But I can tell you for me, the first casualty of COVID-19 in my life was that I was no longer able to continue with Daf Yomi, with learning a page of Talmud a day. It's something which I had started earlier this year in January with the new round of Daf Yomi. I got through Ala Brachot, which is great, and I got into the next tractate of Shabbat, which I was enjoying, and then I just couldn't do it anymore. And as it turned out, I could no longer focus on those higher things of self-actualization, esteem, even love and belonging. The sense of connection with family started to wane, and friendships were harder to maintain when I didn't have face-to-face connection. More and more, I think all of us are focusing on safety and even the very basics of physiological needs. I went grocery shopping last week. This is something which I'm still doing. We're ordering in groceries, but from time to time I am shopping for myself and for my parents. And I saw some flour in the store. And I thought, wow, flour? No one's seen flour. We seem to be out of flour. And I have a bit of a deal with my mom. I drop off flour, and magically I get challah in return. So I bought the flour, of course. 20 kilograms of all-purpose flour. It's all they had in stock. But flour and bread actually play much into this week's parashah. We have a double portion of Bahar and Bechukotai. In Bechukotai, we learn about the blessings and the curses if we obey and if we don't obey. The blessing is you shall eat old grain long stored, and you shall have to clear out the old to make room for the new. There's going to be so much grain, an abundance of grain, that you can eat the old grain, which is understood to be very good grain. You actually have to make room to get rid of it for some new grain because there's just going to be so much of it. But on the flip side, if we don't obey, it's a little complicated. It says, when I break your staff of bread, 10 women shall bake your bread in a single oven. They shall dole out your bread by weight, and though you eat, you shall not be satisfied. It seems that there's going to be very little grain to go around, very little flour, that all these many women will share one small oven because they all have very little. Even the bread probably won't stick together, and you're going to give out just a crumb here and a crumb there. There's clearly an idea that bread and having access to grain is connected with our behavior. And the Torah understands that if we are obeying God, then we will have what we need, we'll be satisfied, and if we don't, then we won't. And in Devarim, in Deuteronomy, we have the famous line, Ki lo al lechem levado yichyeh adam, that man cannot live by bread alone. But actually in context with saying something pretty similar, that the idea that we had hardship in the wilderness, that God gave us manna was a sign to us that actually we're not fully in charge of our own destinies. something I think we can understand these days. And there is a reliance on God to provide for us. We can't rely on bread because sometimes there won't be. Rather, we're going to have to look up and ask for manna from heaven. But then Pirkei Avot says something very interesting. And this time period between Pesach and Shavuot, it's traditional to study Pirkei Avot, ethics of our fathers. And in the 3rd chapter of Pirkei Avot, it says, Im ein kemach ein Torah, im ein Torah ein kemach. If there is no flour, there is no Torah. If there is no Torah, there is no flour. Now, the first one I think we can understand. If there's no flour, there's no Torah. If you don't have your basic needs fulfilled, if you have nothing in your stomach, how could you possibly reach higher into those hierarchies of being? The hierarchy of needs. How can we self-actualize if we're hungry, or God forbid, if we're not living? But at the same time, I think Pirkei Avot asks pretty provocatively that if there's no Torah, there's no flour. That there's no meaning to mere existence. That is, if we're living just to live, almost what's the point? Rather, we have to live in order to strive for something better. This is a really hard moment. Some of us are doing just fine. I talked to you on the phone. You're a little bored. But beyond that, you're actually doing projects and reading and spending quality time with a partner. But some of us are struggling, having a hard time. Shabbat and Sunday, no electronics, no school, even no Zoom school, can't go outside, young kids. This is a hard time, and we're focusing largely on the very basic physiological needs. And I call it a win at the end of the day if everyone is in bed within 30 minutes of bedtime and has food and has had something to drink, and the house hasn't fallen down yet. But we should all be striving for something better. We should all find that little bit of time during our day, not just to focus on the kemach alone, on the flour, but rather that next step. Whether that next step is focusing on a friendship, on intimacy with the partner, on a sense of connection. Whether it's focusing on self, on respect and self-esteem, strength, or something grander like self-actualization, desiring to become the most that one can be. And I think all of those things can be attained through study, through tefillah, through prayer. And while it might not be longer prayer than usual, it might even be shorter than usual, let's hope at this challenging time we can look beyond it, as well as look into ourselves and the world around us, and strive for something beyond mere existence, beyond simply having some flour, but rather something grander, something that connects us with our people, with our God, with our Jewish future. Have a great week, everybody. We have a tremendous amount happening at the shul. There are 7 programs tomorrow alone. I want to mention a very special concert tomorrow night, 8 to 9 p.m., a Lag BaOmer concert featuring Cantor Stein, from his living room to yours. Check out adathisrael.com for all the other programs. So much going on. Hope you have a great day. Shavua Tov.